The COVID-19 vaccines can be our chance to get back to our plans, to get back to each other, to life. But it's okay to have questions like, can the vaccines give you COVID-19? You cannot get COVID-19 from a vaccine. Find the latest information at getvaccineanswers.org.
As a community, we build empathy, curiosity, joy, and connection when we share stories with you. Welcome to Storytellers Project, part of the USA Today Network.
Hi, I'm Megan Finnerty, and I am so excited you're here. Thank you so much for marking Father's Day with us, the Storytellers Project. I'm the founder and director of the project, and we super appreciate you taking a chance on live storytelling and sharing your evening with us. Tonight, we're joining Humana and 4 Americans from across the nation to create community and celebrate Father's Day. Since 2016, the project has brought more than 100 shows to communities across America each year. But we're online only right now because, things are pretty much varying from place to place, and this seems like a sure thing. So we've handpicked incredible, inspiring, I literally mean that, storytellers to bring you a show about fatherhood in so many of its aspects. I'm excited to bring up my colleague and a dad, Greg Moore. He's a columnist for the Arizona Republic in Phoenix, and he's going to talk a little bit about fatherhood and bring up our tellers.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for sharing this time with us. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids. And I remember when I first had my twin sons being so torn about what was the best way to be a dad. If you think about being a Black man in America, we've got some really prominent examples of people who make it without fathers. LeBron James, Barack Obama, Jay-Z. But that's not my experience. I had my dad every day. I had 2 great grandfathers who were around as much as I ever needed them, and I had 7 uncles. So I know all about fatherhood and what a positive male role model and influence can mean in the life of a young person. And I'm excited to help share with you the different forms and aspects that fatherhood can take. Stop now and introduce some of our storytellers. Please help me welcome our tellers from across the nation. And don't forget to cheer with likes and emojis and all of those notes. We'll have Phyllis E. Brodsky from Tucson, Arizona. Mario Bonds from Washington, D.C. Benjamin Tracy Minish from Houston, Texas. And Howard Lieberman from Stillwater, Minnesota. Tonight is not a TED Talk. It's not a Toastmasters. It's not a how-to talk, an inspirational speech, an educational lecture, or a slideshow. We won't sell you anything except maybe a subscription, which is good for me because I work in a newspaper. This is storytelling, and storytelling is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind, and you pay attention to the person you care about and want to feel closer to. So we invite you to do that tonight. Some of the storytellers will be polished and professional. Some will be casual and conversational. We ask you to receive them all because that's how community change happens. We believe that creating empathy and understanding is vital at all times, but especially in times of uncertainty, like now. Which brings me to this, the Storytellers Project. This show you're watching now was designed to create empathy, to truly welcome strangers together in a shared safe space. The whole point is that when we share and listen to stories and we learn about those around us, we come to know them, not fear them. We come to value them, not dismiss them. And we see how they matter.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you so much for getting us into the show. With that, I do appreciate it. I know that you juggle so much as a journalist, and that everything is on fire all the time. And so we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Megan.
Heck yeah. All right, with that, we are going to welcome up our very first storyteller. Mario is here to take the stage. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here to tell you about my unique story, being a totally blind man who dared to adopt 4 boys. Now, growing up, I experienced several bouts of homelessness, paternal abandonment, several different forms of abuse. And again, this all happened against the backdrop of going totally blind after being born with a degenerative eye disease called morning glory syndrome that took all of my vision by the time I was 9. But luckily, I had a great advocate in my grandmother who fought feverishly to keep me in public school, to make sure I was mainstreamed when the school said, no, we should send him to a school for the blind. Those schools have their places, but my grandmother said, no, please bring assistive technology to Mario where he is, and again, so that he can be mainstreamed, both socially and educationally. And I've been blessed to have the chance to be that same fire for my own children. But my climb to get to where I am, indeed, wasn't easy. I often say that the abuse I experienced, the homelessness, the paternal abandonment, all of those adversities I feel work together as my own house of cards to get me to the place that I am today, to have the nerve to help children. Now, when I was 29 years old, 4 years ago, I like to say that I look 22 when I look in the mirror, but I'm totally blind. But when I was 29 years old, I became a licensed foster care provider. I wanted to give back. And for 6 months, the foster agency would call and say, hey, we need temporary respite for this kid. He'll just be there for a second. Then respite would turn into what they call a permanent foster care placement. And that would end up going to the road to adoption, where I'd say, you know what? I'm responding to this kid, and this kid is responding to this blind dude, and I think I could help him, so let's do it. So 4 times back to back, respite, temporary placement, to permanent placement, to the road to adoption, to 4 adoptions being completed in the year 2019. That happened 4 times back to back, and here we are. And I'll tell you, when I first realized that parenthood was alive, because I didn't take the slow road to do it biologically, was when he's now 8 years old, but at the time he was about 4, when he woke up in the middle of the night and then woke me up and said, Dad, I just puked. So it's like, you know, of course you're saying to myself, oh my God. So in the middle of the night, this blind dude, along with the kid, was in the hallway cleaning up projectile vomit. Look at my face. In the middle of the night. But I had to get used to that fluid because I'm now a parent. And so I often say that my kids, despite my blindness, still think that I'm Super Mario, an intentional play on my name. Why is that? Because they don't see me as blind, because I don't let them. So much so to the degree that my kids were sure that I was going to be able to play catch with them. So one day they said, Dad, come out and play catch with us. And I'm thinking, gee, I'm not going outside to play catch with you guys. You guys, these kids are off their rockers. Foster care has definitely destroyed their brain cells. But they were adamant. Dad, please come out and play catch with us. Please come out and play catch. But when I went outside, these kids of their own volition, they had come up with an adaptive formula themselves so that their blind dad could play catch. And this included instructions to one another. Hey, doofus, don't run on the right side of the yard because over there is a whole bunch of twigs and logs. Dad can't run over there. And when you run, make sure you speak loudly or yell so Dad can hear you. And don't let one of them forget to run because they're not going to forget to yell because they're not going to have that. Fabian, you're not yelling. Mika, you're not yelling. And I was out there for an hour or 2 playing catch like any other father would with children. And to this day, that experience still gives me absolute chills. Now, again, as I said before, my history I feel prepared me for the moment to be able to give back. Kids in foster care, when they come in, all of my kids had bounced around from home to home to home until they found a permanent home with me. Why? Because a lot of times when the kids act up or they lash out, people give up. And I noticed that my kids, when they lashed out here, they had never experienced what it felt like to lash out, have a bad moment, and wake up and still know that the person is still there. So I had the opportunity to show them that that is what family is about. When you wake up and the next day, they're still there. And the day before was just a moment, and that family is resilient. So at this particular point, I share music with the kids because I believe music has healing powers. Now, of course, when my 17-year-old came to me and said to me that he wanted to be a rapper, I'm like, here we go again, ritualistically. Everybody want to be a rapper. Can you flow? Yeah, I can flow. Go, Mario. I wasn't with it. But he inspired me to start writing for him and inspired me that he could actually write. And so even within a week, my kids will be participating in an anti-bullying virtual concert with me because, again, I believe music has healing powers. And because of that, I typically put them to bed with this. We are one, you and I. We are like the earth and sky. We're one family under the sun. I will stand by your side, filled with hope and filled with pride. 'Cause we are more than we are. We are one. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Mario, thank you so much. Thank you for closing with a song. Thank you for being so thoughtful and so funny and so charming. I know my colleagues are texting about how they're crying now. So,
Thank you.
oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining us on this show and sharing your sense of humor and grace with us so much tonight.
Thank you for the invite.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, I'm going to take a big deep breath. Mario brings so many aspects of joy, but also modeling enormous goodwill in his story. And I just want to take a moment to thank him as well for the generosity he has shown in opening his home. He's truly modeling what a father is, and that is a person who looks out for others and who creates space, who creates a home, who makes them safe. Now I'm tearing up. So now is when we'd like, I know, right? I'd like to thank Humana. Kind of hard pivot there, but Humana is sponsoring our virtual season, and we are really thankful to them. They've been sponsoring us in the outside times, and they've stuck with us now throughout the whole pandemic last year and this year too. They believe that sharing stories and connecting as humans, whether in person or online, makes for healthier people and healthier communities. We know we need these connections to each other and to our health now more than ever. As COVID-19 vaccinations become widely available, Humana strongly encourages you to consider getting one and to talk to your doctor about what might be right for your health. If you want to learn more about what they and their agents are doing to make communities stronger and healthier, you can visit humana.com. And we really want to thank them for their ongoing support of the project because it funds stories like all of these tonight and our ability to bring them to you. So thanks so much to Humana for being there for us. I would now like to bring up our next storyteller. Phyllis is here to tell us a story about her changing perceptions of fathers and what that means. Take it away, Phyllis.
Thanks, Megan. I was born in 1961 in Phoenix, Arizona, to a white middle-class Jewish family of Ashkenazi descent. My grandparents were immigrants from Poland and Russia and Romania. And by the time I was about 5 or 6 years old, I began to notice some differences between myself and my relatives. And when I say relatives, I mean all of them. My parents, my brother, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. One of the first things I noticed was my hair. I have very fine, thin, straight hair, what I call cheap hair. All of my relatives had either wavy, curly, super curly, or frizzy hair. All of my relatives also had brown hair, dark brown hair, almost black hair, and I was born a towhead. So I started asking my mom if I was adopted, and I'd asked her more than once, but I remember one morning she was making lunch before school for my brother and I asked her again, Mom, was I adopted? And in the most loving, kind tone, she said, no, honey, you were not adopted. She said, I remember the day you were born and they laid you across my belly and they told me you were a girl and I fell in love with you. And she said, and when they told your dad that you were 9 pounds, 3 ounces, he asked the doctor if you were going to be obese. So that sounded like a pretty good birth story and I stuck with it for a while. But by the time I was about 13, those differences continued to emerge. I noticed eye color. My relatives all had various shades of brown, few blue-eyed people from Russia, and my eyes are green. I noticed that the shape of my body was different. The women in my family had long, lean, beautiful legs, and I'm curvy. I've got thighs, hips, a bubble butt. Didn't like those compared to the other women in my family. And it wasn't just physical. One example is I was really good at math. They said they couldn't measure my aptitude in math when I was in 6th grade, and I skipped 8th grade math completely, and I loved math. Nobody in my family even came close to fitting that profile. So by then I knew how babies were made. And so my question changed, and sort of in a flippant tone, I recall one time just saying to my mom, all right, Mom, was it the mailman? Was it the milkman? Because, they were all men back then. She just said no. There was no tenderness to that voice. When I was 35 in 1996, I was having lunch with my father. And we were just chatting, and we were on the topic of relationships. And really, for no particular reason, I just said, Dad, have you ever cheated before? And he said, no, I'm a one-woman kind of guy. And he said, but your mom cheated once. So I thought, okay, didn't really seem to amount to much. I didn't judge her. She'd had a tough life. And I just thought, okay, nothing I really need to know about. About a year went by. We were having lunch again, my father and I. And it occurred to me to ask him when that affair happened. So I did. And I said, was that when I was 10? Was that what caused the divorce? And he said, no. He said, it was really shortly after your brother died. I had a brother who drowned when he was 4 years old, and his name was Mark. And so I knew the pain that comes from the loss of a child in a family. And so when he told me that, I thought, okay, maybe that makes sense. Maybe she was just in her sorrow and grief, an affair happened. A few more months went by. And I was talking to her on a normal Sunday afternoon. She was in Kansas City and I was in Tucson. And it was just a normal conversation. And she started going off on a rant. And she said, your uncle is just the biggest liar. He's a compulsive liar. He's a pathological liar. And he's going to teach his daughter to be a liar. And all of a sudden, my heart started racing. And I felt these unprepared words, unrehearsed, wasn't ready to ask them that day, started to come out. And I said, while we're on the subject of lying, Mom, Dad told me that you had an affair years ago. And I don't care. I don't judge you. It's fine. I don't even really want to know about it unless I'm related to that man. And if I'm related to that man, I need to know. It was in the pregnant pause that followed that my world fell apart. And she said, I'm not ready to talk to you about it right now. And I said, you just answered my question. I could never have anticipated the absolute devastation that I felt. I spent the next few days wandering around my house, not eating, not sleeping. And I remember just even looking at my arms and thinking, whose arms are these? Whose hands are these? And I realized it wasn't that I felt like a lie had been told to me. I felt that I actually was the lie. My mom passed 6 months after that. And in that space, she shared with me everything she knew about him. She told me he was from the deep South, from Mobile, Alabama. He was born in the 1930s, early 1930s. He had met me. He did know about me. Last time he saw me, I was 2. And he was an engineer. And he has an impossibly common name. So I knew I was going to start searching. And back then, there was not the search engines. There was no 23andMe or, been verified. We just didn't have the tools back then to do it all on the internet the way we do now. So I contacted a detective, and he said it would be incredibly expensive because he'd have to go to Mobile, etc. So that wasn't going to work. A friend of mine told me she knew a psychic, and so I talked to her, and really that didn't come to fruition. So I knew I was just going to keep looking, and there were some things I really wanted to find. I wanted to know if I had siblings. I wanted to know my medical history, and I wanted to know my story, because the story that I believed to be true wasn't true anymore. And more than anything, I wanted to see a photo of someone who I looked like. Also, as I looked, I was afraid of a few things. I was afraid that I would disrupt a family, that I would pop out of nowhere and it would cause pain to another family. And so I knew I had to proceed with compassion and kindness. And I also had to allow that to be their story if that's what took place. I was afraid that he might be a really bad guy. And I was also afraid that I might actually find him and he would be on the other end of the phone and he would deny it. About 10 years into looking, I decided I really needed to come to peace with the idea that I would never find him. So I told myself that if I never find him, then not finding him will be my story. But I continued looking. Some days I would spend 8 hours on the computer, and then months would go by before I would look again. It was always the same process. I would follow a little lead that would lead to a little something else, and just this windy rabbit hole. And it would end in one of two places. I would either hit a wall where it was clear it wasn't the right person, or it would hit a maybe, a phone number, an email, and I would do a cold call. And nothing happened for years and years. And then on August 1st, 2017, my dad's birthday, the dad who raised me, I followed yet another lead. And it led to a woman who may or may not have been related to a man with that name. And there was another woman who was close to my age, may or may not have been her daughter. And it just kind of seemed like some things were sort of lining up. I hadn't hit that wall yet. And the daughter had a pretty good digital footprint. I found her on LinkedIn. I found her on Facebook messaging. And so I sent out this blitz, like 2 or 3 different places. And I said basically the same thing, really minimal information. I didn't say why I was looking for him, just that I was looking for him. And like hundreds of times before, I walked away. But this time, about 20 minutes went by and the phone rang, and it was her. And she asked me why I was looking for him. Fair enough question. And I said, because I'm related to him. And then I filled in some of the rest of it. I told more information that I had as quickly as I could. And then she said, how are you related to him? And I had to take pause because this was the moment. And I said, I'm his daughter. And she said, you found the man you've been looking for. I never could have imagined the minutes, hours, days, months, and now years that would follow that phone call. Not only did I find him, but I found an amazing, loving, open-hearted family. By later on that evening, he and I began our email correspondence. And right away, he said to me, you have not disrupted this family. I will answer any question that you have. And he said, I knew if you had your mother's tenacity that you would find me. I've been waiting for you all these years. Since then, I have visited him for Father's Day, for his birthday, and most recently, I visited him for my birthday, the first birthday he and I spent together in my life. And the last night I was there, we were sitting in the office, and I just said, Dad, you could have not, opened the door to me. I mean, you invited me into your family, you invited me into your life, you invited me into your heart, and you didn't have to do that. And I can never thank you enough. And he said, the door was never closed to you.
Phyllis, thank you so much for that story. When you mentioned him saying that if you had your mother's tenacity, that there was no way you wouldn't find him, thank you for sharing that. It's just a powerful, powerful story.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to take a deep breath, and I'd like to introduce our next storyteller. Next storyteller, Benjamin Tracy Minish of Houston, Texas. He has a story about fatherhood, faith, and fortitude. Tracy, take it away.
During my 37-year career at NASA, I've trained shuttle astronauts, I've served as a branch chief, and I'm currently the Mission Control Center Operations Manager. Also, for 5 years, I chaired a board that was responsible for setting up the interfaces for our international partners' control centers and their requirements that required extensive international travel. I am legally blind with 5 degrees of my field of vision left. I have retinitis pigmentosa, and it's kind of like looking through maybe a straw with about 40% of the pixels removed. I was traveling in the summer of 2011, and I was in Moscow staying at the Volga. And the Volga is like an old hotel. It's got tall ceilings, dimly lit, and lots of steps up and lots of steps down. I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and when I shut the door, I knew immediately something had gone wrong. I thought to myself, Houston, we have a problem. I turned around, shut the door, and it was locked. I was locked out in the hallway wearing just my whitey-tighties, my Fruit of the Looms. I had no cane, no cell phone, and none of my teammates on the same floor. I did a quick inspection as best I could and realized my underwear was clean, so my mama would be proud. I made my way to the elevator, and I hit the bottom button. And when I was waiting on the elevator, I started thinking, what if somebody's on there? What if it's a female? Doors open, nobody screamed, so I got on. There's a whole array of buttons, and so I decided to play Russian roulette and hit the bottom one, and bingo, I'd chosen wisely. When I stepped out of the elevator, I thought to myself, I need to review the obstacle course that laid before me. I would go about 3 meters, and then I'd go down about 3 steps. I'd turn to the right, go a few meters, I'd go up 2 steps, go about 20 meters, go down some steps, turn to the right again, I should be at the front desk. To psych myself up, I started chanting, USA, USA. I would not do a faceplant in my whitey-tighties in the Russian Olympics. I was representing NASA in my country. So like a ninja, I slowly made my way with great skill to the front desk, and I was so happy to hear a male voice when I got there. So I asked him for my key and for a towel. Now y'all may be thinking, a towel to cover up your Fruit of the Looms, but no, it was actually to be used as a tether. I didn't think my Russian comrade would like me putting my arm around his and we parading through the lobby with me in my underwear. I had 3 lessons learned from that adventure. The first one was always keep my cell phone with me. My second one was to never shut my bathroom door. And my third one was boxers, boxers, boxers. Now, I learned a lot while traveling the world blind, going to different places, but nothing could prepare me for the phone call and the trip I had to make about 5 years ago. And my oldest son, Tyler, has an adventurous heart. He has hiked and scuba dived around the world in Peru, in New Zealand, in Norway, Alaska, Hawaii. And on this trip, he'd gone to Africa for a safari. And on his last day, he was going to scuba dive off the coast of Zanzibar. It was on July the 17th of 2016, about 10:30 on a Sunday night, when my wife and I received a phone call telling us that our son Tyler was paralyzed on the right side and he was paralyzed below the sternum. Those are hard words for a parent to hear. And my wife and I cried together. We got down on our knees and prayed together. And we got up and started developing a plan of how we were going to help Tyler. Now, working at NASA, we have the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. It's a huge swimming pool where we practice spacewalks. And we actually have one tomorrow morning. And we have a hydrobaric chamber there. So I knew the person who ran that, Mike Fox, And even though it was about 12 o'clock at night, I gave him a call. He told me under no circumstances could Tyler get on a commercial flight flying at altitude because it could release nitrogen bubbles that could kill him. I knew right then that I'd be going to Africa and to Zanzibar. I had a passport, I was familiar with international travel, and failure was not an option. So the next morning I got up, went into work, grabbed my passport out of my desk drawer, told my boss I'd be gone for a few days, stopped by the Minute Clinic at CVS, got shots and pills, and then got online to get a ticket. So the best ticket I could get had me going to London with a 6-hour layover, then to Cairo for a 4-hour layover, and then I would go to Tanzania. And then at Tanzania, I would get a plane over to Zanzibar. We packed, my wife helped me pack 3 shirts, 3 pair of boxers, and 3 pair of shorts and a backpack, and we were off to the airport. Now, my wife's passport had expired, so she would stay in Houston and run Operation Save Tyler from there. On the way to the airport, we were actually able to talk to Tyler for the first time, and he sounded so brave and strong. It was just so inspiring. He had had a chamber run and regained the use of his right arm, but he was still paralyzed below the sternum. He told us if he had to, he'd be the best wheelchair athlete in the world. Emboldened by my son's, just his courage and his spirit, I got on the plane and headed out. After about 24 hours of travel, we got to Tanzania, or I did. And when I was getting off the plane, I was just trying to follow the mob or the herd. And the next thing I knew, I was outside and nobody had taken my passport. Nobody had gotten my visa stamped. So I just said I had to go with it. I was not going to go back in. Sherry had arranged for a lady to meet me there. She was going to help me get to the plane to get to Zanzibar and to the hospital, but nobody was out there. They had also powered off my phone, so I had no phone to do anything with. So eventually I made my way to a little airport and bought me a ticket to go to Zanzibar. And when I got on the plane, I realized I was sitting on the bench and I'd bought a ticket on a skydiving plane, but they'd given me no parachute. Luckily, I was able to make it to the island, get to the hospital, and Tyler and I had a joyous reunion. Tyler had had a couple more chamber runs, and now he was able to walk, but still had no feeling below his sternum, and he was having to use a catheter. The hospital was in the inner city, far away from the resort area. It had no air conditioning. The shower, the toilet, and the sink was in one enclosure. There was always 2 to 3 inches of water. They had no cafeteria, nobody that actually would serve you and bring you food, and there were lots of mosquitoes in our hospital room. So each day, a local doctor would pick Tyler and me up about 3:30. We would travel for an hour out to an area where they had a hyperbaric chamber. Tyler would take 3 runs. When he had finished, we'd get back in the car and the doctor would drive us back, usually starting about 10 o'clock at night. Now, on every trip, we would get stopped by either police or the military, and they would do document inspections, and sometimes they charged fees. They were really bribes to give us back our documentation, and they had machine guns, so it was really scary, especially at night. After about 7 days, the doctor decided that Tyler was making no progress, so totally against the advice of our American doctors, he quit treatments. This really was upsetting, and we were trying to figure out what to do. So from day one, my wife and I, Sherry, had started trying to figure out how we would get Tyler home. It would require a Learjet, and it would cost $1.2 million. And as you can imagine, the insurance company said, this is not covered. So Sherry and I thought about doing a GoFundMe, maybe using a boat to get him around since we couldn't go on a plane, possibly doing selling our house, cashing out our 401k, but nothing came up with the money we needed and as fast as we needed since he wasn't getting treatments. After about 2 weeks of negotiating, going back and forth, the insurance company told us that they would pay for were covered under the insurance. And that was on August 1st. And that happens to be my wife's birthday. So best birthday present ever. We would fly on a Learjet at low altitude. From Zanzibar, we would go to Sudan. From Sudan to some islands off of Greece. From Greece to Germany. From Germany, we'd go to Finland. From there to Iceland, then to Canada, and then to New Orleans, where Tyler would get treatments. On August 4th, we were picked up by the ambulance and taken to the plane on the runway. We were so happy about doing that. But when they came out to inspect our documentation, they pulled me off the plane. Now, the pilot already told me that they were on a very tight schedule. So I knew that I might be delayed a while. So I told him if I wasn't back in 30 minutes, to take off without me. They took me in the airport, asked me a ton of questions, searched me over, and then just stuck me in a room. After I was sitting there for about 10 minutes, I thought, I just got to do something. So I made my way to a door, and I just bent over, grabbed my knees, and fake dry heaves. Oh! Oh! Next thing I knew, I was like surrounded. People were patting my head, checking on me, doing things, and they took me to the plane. It was just a joyous moment. So we made that trip and got to New Orleans, where we had amazing doctors treat Tyler for 2 weeks in the hospital there. Then we were released and he went to Houston for more treatments. And I just had 3 things I would take that helped me get through that journey. My faith in God, my wife, Sherry, my family and friends, and Tyler, his tremendous courage. So I have a praise report. Tyler was married 2 weeks ago. And on Saturday, just a couple of days ago, we picked Tyler and Emily up, his wife, at the airport, and they'd been on their honeymoon in Hawaii. And we told them, no scuba diving allowed. Now, I have 3 sons. I have Carson, my middle son, and he works as at our church that he was raised in. And I have my youngest son, Chase, and he actually works for the state of Texas, helping blind kids get an education and to pay for their school and helps them with jobs. My middle son, Carson, has my same eye disease, making it 5 generations this disease has attacked our family. We recently gave spit, some blood, and some meat, and had our DNA defect identified as PRPF31. Carson just recently gifted us with our first grandbaby, Hank. And because of the research that's being done today, I believe Hank and Carson were never totally blind. Sometimes, as a father, I just say, you think when you start off that you're going to be the one, you're going to lead them through the darkness and into the light and all these things. But I find my children challenge me more, and they're always making me want to give more, to serve more, to live more, and especially love more. And failure is not an option. Thank you.
Tracy, thank you so much for your story. We are so lucky to have your sense of humor and your charisma and your willingness to act out both dry heaving and spitting. Right. But I also just want to say, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness at the end of your story, because I know it must feel incredibly bittersweet to be so proud of your sons and your legacy and your family, and yet to also know that you have this very real condition, a real thing to deal with. And I know your optimism and your work toward finding a cure is really profound. Thank you. Oh, Tracy's story is just so emotional. I mean, I know everything's kind of emotional. It's a Father's Day show, but it is. And I want to underline this quick idea. At the opening part of his story, he tells this very funny story about being in Russia and being in his underwear, and then he pivots and tells a completely different kind of travel story. And I appreciate his sense of humor about how in the one story, his blindness was a primary factor, and in the other story, it doesn't come up at all. The story is totally about his fatherhood and scrambling to find resources and his faith. And can you imagine finding out you need $1 million? I mean, all these things in his story, I'm sure like me, you were like, what next? So what a breakneck story, Tracy. Thank you for sharing it tonight. I want to take just
It's actually not possible to get COVID-19 from any of these vaccines because they are not using live virus.
Short-term side effects that were observed in the leading COVID-19 vaccine trials included injection site pain and redness, fatigue, muscle aches and pains, joint pain, and headache.
When one develops these short-term symptoms after receiving the vaccine, that in fact is a sign that the vaccine is working and that your body is marshaling its defense network.
It's important to note that none of these vaccines can give you COVID-19 since they only express a protein from the virus that allows your body's immune system to generate antibodies.
Thanks, vaccine people. That message, actually, I'm joking. That message is brought to us as part of our partnership with Humana, and we appreciate them helping to spread the word about vaccines and what's normal and what's not normal, so you know what to expect. I want to take just a second to thank Fairy Tale Brownies. You know, they're like OG supporters of the Storytellers Project. Since 2014, they've been hanging out with us, ensuring that all of our subscribers for in-person shows get these giant, amazing gourmet brownies. And while we can't offer you brownies right this second through the power of the internet, you can offer yourself brownies right this second. You can buy brownies. But really what they're doing to support our shows during this over the internet times is they're sending thank you boxes to all of our storytellers. So we want to say thank you to Fairy Tale Brownies. They own brownies.com, as you can see. And if you want to sign up, they will send you brownies, they will send you discounts, they will send you alerts, blah, blah, blah. But really you can rest assured you're giving your business to truly a small business. It's owned by two regular people, Eileen and Dave, right here in Phoenix, Arizona. And they really believe that brownies deliver happy endings, right? They deliver joy and sweetness and chocolate to anybody you send them to. So if you're still kind of thinking like, hey, maybe I hit the nose for my Father's Day gift, I think you can still send your dad a Fairy Tale Father's Day box. And if not, it can arrive Monday. No big deal. Brownies are always on time. So with that, we want to say thanks you to Fairy Tale Brownies for supporting the Storytellers Project in person and online since 2014. And you can do your part to support them or show your support of our show, but you can always send them a little note saying thanks for supporting Storytellers. We're here for it. So thanks so much to Dave and Eileen. With that, we're bringing up our last storyteller. Howard is here to share with us a story about really being a father to his daughter across time. Take it away.
Thank you. Before I begin, I'd like to say a couple of quick things. I got a box of those Fairy Tale Brownies, and I've worked my way through them, and they're very good. And secondarily, I'm on Medicare, and my Medicare pharma provider is Humana. And Humana does a great job. I'm not connected to any of those things, but I just coincidentally want to say good companies. I appreciate them. Okay, now that I've plugged the sponsors, there are tons of books that can teach a person how to be a parent, how to be a father in my case. I know because I've read them all. But in reality, you learn from your role models. You replicate what you see as a young person. And so you might say, well, you learned from your father, right? And I sort of did, but let me tell you about my father. Now, I can make my father sound really, really interesting. He was a tap dancer, a gifted musician. He got his first pair of tap shoes and his dancing name, which was Lee, from Mr. Bojangles, Bill Bojangles Robinson. And my father, during the Depression, hitchhiked all around the country tap dancing, mostly in Black communities because the white communities didn't really want to see that kind of dancing. And he was very, very creative. The problem is he was a really, really, really bad dad. Like a lot of artists, he was a narcissist and didn't really care for anybody but himself. So when I was 9, he just danced away. He left us on a moment's notice and just went to Southern California, never to be found again. But that was okay. I had my mom, and I was more her daughter anyway. I learned how to cook and sew and clean and do all the things that a daughter would learn, which was okay because I could make a house like a mom. But then my mom died when I was 14, and I no longer had a house to make. Actually, I didn't really have a house at all anymore. After Shiva, the mourning period for the dead in the Jewish faith, I was angry. I had no father, I had no mother, and I was bounced around from different temporary homes, one to the other, to the other, to the other, each one getting rid of me before very long. And I had no role models at all. One father was a womanizing crud. Another father was a totally conceited, arrogant, narcissistic, the world revolves around me kind of person. And the third person, who was an uncle, was kind of one of those, I'm a patriarch and you will learn from me. And so I tried. I really tried until the day he took everything I owned. Everything, which wasn't much, but put it in a cardboard box, put a note on the box and said, "You're no longer welcome here. Please leave. Never come back." Well, I never did. I never did. And at that moment, I was a teenager and I was homeless. I had no place to live. Now you might say, well, you had to live somewhere. Where did you sleep? Well, I don't know. I don't recall. And my brother, from whom I was separated fairly young, he was here for my 70th birthday, and he looked at me and he said, "Where did you live all those years?" And I didn't know. But I can tell you, when you're homeless, you tend to engage in risky behavior. And since this might be a show that has kids watching, I won't tell you what some of that behavior was. But when you think of the concept of risky behavior, I engaged in all of it. And I was self-destructive, and I was angry. And I wanted to hurt someone, probably myself. Fatherhood? I didn't care about fatherhood. I took a look one day at a group of homeless bums on the street near me. They were drinking cheap whatever from a bottle. And I looked at those people, those human beings, and I said, I can be one of you. I can be homeless. I can do this until I die. But I chose not to. I have a good intellect. I'm kind of funny. I picked up some of my father's stage presence, and I'm a good dancer, by the way. So I decided, instead of going that way and joining with the homeless folks, I stuck out my thumb with my backpack on my back, and I took off. And I took off, and when you're homeless, you go where the road takes you. And I wound up in all kinds of places. But eventually I wound up in New York City, where I spent 20 years of my life. I went to school. I got a bachelor's degree finally after a long time. I went on and got a graduate degree from Columbia in global finance. I went on and got a law degree. I was recruited by the NSA and the CIA to become a spy. But I did none of those things. I became a corporate lawyer. I was the person who helped the rich people get richer. The bountiful people find ways to not pay tax. It was not what I wanted to do, but it's what I did. I still don't know how to be a father, but to stay sane, I learned how to do traditional Irish ceilidh dancing. This goes all over the place, but this is my life, all over the place. And I eventually became an instructor in Irish dancing. I became the artistic director of the Irish Art Center in New York City, which is where I met my wife, Pat Moore, back in 1979. Eventually, we got married, partially because we both wanted a child and didn't think it would be fair to raise a child if we weren't married. We would stigmatize the child. And so we got married, and we did things that, two professional people in New York City did. We went to theater, we did this, blah, 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 until my wife got pregnant. Well, I panicked. What am I going to do? I don't know how to be a father. Do I really want to do this? It's going to ruin my life. I'm a free spirit. We can go anywhere. We can take trips. We can go to the theater, go to the opera, go to ballet, go to whatever. A child will ruin that, I thought. I don't know if I want a child. Too late, Pat said. We're having a child. I ignored that. I said, I'm going to put that behind me. I'm not going to worry about this. I'll figure it out when I get there. I don't know what I'm going to do. How did I become a father of all things? Well, when my wife's water broke, I got hysterical. I started going, I tried to make the crib. I'm not handy. I'm a little Jewish intellectual guy. But I figured out how to make a crib, how to make that mobile that hangs above the crib and goes around, and I'm hysterical. I'm where's the wrench? Where's the pliers? And my wife is in the bathroom. Her water broke, but her husband, her devoted husband, is freaking out. And maybe a lot of men do that, and I suspect they do. I said, let's go to the hospital. So we did. We went to the hospital. We got to the hospital. The OB comes in, says, I have interesting news. Your daughter is Frank Breach. Now, for the men in the audience who may not know what Frank Breach is, that means she was kind of bent in half, and her little bottom was coming out first, which is fairly stressful and can cause tremendous pain and worse. Well, we get rushed into the birthing operating room. I have this big video camera, which we had back then, and I put it on my shoulder, and I began filming this horrible birth. I mean, it was a very difficult birth. If you know the word episiotomy, I won't go into a lot of detail, but there was a substantial episiotomy, and I'm glad my wife is not in the room with me to hear all this. But the good news is, in my angst and my stress, I forgot to put a cassette in the player. So none of this was ever recorded, but it was recorded up here. But as soon as Megan, our daughter, was born, she went right into the neonatal ICU. She couldn't move her body in certain ways. She couldn't do this. Her APGAR test, her first standardized test, it wasn't very good. Not very good at all. And I was a corporate lawyer doing deals. Picture me in bow ties and power suits and all this kind of nonsense, rushing in and out of the hospital, sticking my hands in those little holes in the isolette in the neonatal ICU, touching my daughter, feeling my poor, small, tiny daughter, her heartbeat going up my arms. Right then, I said, I will be a good father. And Megan, I will be there for you all the time, no matter what, no matter where. And I was always there for my daughter. I took her to school every day. I did her hair every day. I could do a French braid when she got older. I can still do a French braid with, and I'm fairly impressed by that. I did everything. I never missed a school meeting. Even after my daughter said, Dad, other dads don't come to every meeting. Please don't come. It embarrasses me. Didn't matter. I was at every meeting. I coached her in softball for about a decade. I grabbed all the kids. I put them in a van. I took them everywhere. We played in tournaments. I was going to be the father my father never was. And I always, always, always remembered not to be mean to my daughter. Now, you could argue that maybe I spoiled her from time to time. And I did. I did. But I was the one who was always awake when she came home at her curfew. I was the one into whose eyes Megan had to look. Because I told her, Megan, there's nothing you can do that I haven't done before. And I'll know. And she hated that. She hated the fact that I was always up. But one time I was sick. I was puking my guts out. And I was in bed, and Megan came in and said, Dad, where are you? I said, Megan, I'm in bed sleeping. I'm really sick. She said, please get up. Please get up. And so I did. And we sat and we talked. And we played video games together. And I was a good father. I was a great father. Well, my daughter decided that she did not like living in small town Minnesota, which is where we live. She wanted to go to school out in LA. She wanted to go to Occidental College, otherwise known as Oxy. And so we went out, we drove out for the college tours and did all those things. And when she said, now, Dad, walk away. I want to see what the other kids are like. And I don't want my father around. That was like a dagger to my heart, but I understood. I recovered. And she wound up getting accepted to Oxy. And she went to Oxy. And we would drive there together, back and forth from Minnesota to LA. Well, when we first dropped her off at Occidental, maybe you've lived through this. You help your daughter or your son schlep all their boxes into their little dorm room. You have no idea where they're going to put all that stuff, but that's not your job to figure that out. That's their job. Okay, back off a little bit, Dad. Then you wave goodbye and you get in your car and you pull away, knowing if you raised her right, this will be good for her. Well, we didn't pull away right away because I was driving and I was crying uncontrollably, like a baby, weeping, snot coming out my nose. Pat, my wife, she's Irish. She doesn't cry. That's not what she does. I cry. We eventually left, went home, but my work took me back and forth to LA a lot. So about 2 weeks after Megan started Occidental, I called her up and said, I'm going to be in town. Let's go have a nice dinner. I'm staying in Beverly Hills. And I'll take you to a really nice seafood restaurant, not far from my hotel. And we did. And I was staying in a friend's guest house in Glendale. And Occidental is it's just north of downtown LA. I dropped Megan off at her dorm, said goodbye. I'll see you again, probably in a month. Drove back to my guest house. I'm about to turn off the car, and Megan calls. She's crying. She says, Dad, please come get me. And I do, of course. And we go back to my little guest house. And we sit down on the living room floor. And we cry, and we cry, and we cry. She's lonely. The girls from Beverly Hills are being mean, and they don't include her in anything. She has no friends. What can she do? And we weep, and we weep. And I hold her face, and she holds mine. And I say, Megan, if you want to leave and come home to Minnesota, the university will take you in an instant. But if you don't want to do that and think that might be defeating, stay. Give it your best. But just promise me that if next year, when you own the place, if you see a young person lost, maybe with tears in their eyes, you go up to that person and reach out and be their friend. She said, yes. I kissed her on the forehead and I told her, I love you, Megan. And she looked at me and said, I love you, Dad. You're the best dad in the whole world. Well, she graduated Oxy. And she's doing very well. She's married to a wonderful guy. And they live in Houston today. And she's a teacher about to become a teacher's teacher, teaching literacy for teachers around the state of Texas. She has 2 wonderful kids who are my grandkids. And no, I don't have anybody to look up to, anyone to emulate, any grandfather figure to whom I can say, I'm going to do it the way Grandpa did, because I never knew my grandfathers. But you know what? I'll figure out how to be a grandpa, and I'll do it well. You know why? Because that's what I do. I figure things out. And then they come for the first time since the pandemic to visit us on July 3rd. I will probably cry once again when I meet them at the airport. I can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. You know, the thing that strikes me about the story is that you were taking something negative and making something positive out of it. Your father didn't give you maybe what you needed, so you found a way to give it to your daughter, and then your daughter is able to then share that if she finds somebody who's sort of lost or sort of out there. So thank you very much for sharing that. All right, guys, that's it's going to conclude the show. Megan, I'll bring you back up, and let's say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, let's bring up all of tonight's storytellers so we can thank you guys collectively. There we go. Oh, hi. Hey, buddy. Hi, Phyllis. Awesome. I want to say thank you so much to all of our storytellers tonight. And then we want to say, Greg, thank you so much for being our co-MC and joining us on this little tiny fatherhood journey. I also want to take just a second to say thank you so much to all the fathers who make the Storytellers Project possible. In my life, that's my dad, Mike, and my husband, Vince, who's with our kiddo right now, literally in the next room. And so thank you so much. Tune in soon for our next show. If you're a fan of the project, we hope that you keep watching us. This was one of our very special Father's Day shows, but we are going to be bringing you Stories About Stories on July 13th, in which our colleagues from across the USA Today network tell you stories about the journalism that changed their communities or the stories that changed them. With that, I hope you have a great Father's Day on Sunday, and that you feel close to all the dads in your life, whether they are like literally your dad or they're more of a father figure. Thanks so much.